Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Telli Bear's Techy Tidbits, your cozy corner for STEM news. Today, we're going to look at how technology is shaping our world in three really different ways. We'll start with the huge, foundational stuff, then zoom all the way into the human body for something that sounds like science fiction, and finally, we'll look at how new inventions are challenging our oldest laws. It's going to be a fascinating journey, and we'll take it one step at a time, together.
So first up, we'll dive into Amazon's massive investment in the future of AI. After that, we'll explore a mind-bending surgery that can actually restore sight. And we'll wrap things up by untangling the tricky legal questions around ghost guns, where a simple computer file can become a huge controversy. Let's get right into it. All right, our first story is literally about building the future. We're talking about a truly enormous investment in the nuts and bolts of artificial intelligence. According to Amazon's official press releases, the company is planning to invest up to $50 billion. That's a staggering number, right? And the stated goal for all this is to seriously expand the AI and supercomputing power that's available to U.S. government agencies.
So what does $50 billion actually build? Well, Amazon's documents say it's going toward new data centers that will add about 1.3 gigawatts of computing capacity, with work starting in 2026. And this is just one piece of a much larger strategy, which also includes a separate $3 billion campus plan for Warren County, Mississippi.
And this is where it starts to matter for everyday people. What does this mean for the local communities? Well, that Mississippi investment alone is expected to create hundreds of direct jobs. We're talking everything from data center engineers to security specialists, plus it will support many more roles in construction and the local supply chain. Okay, I know we're hearing a lot of technical terms, so let's do a quick jargon check. When we talk about AI and supercomputing infrastructure, it's totally okay if that sounds a little fuzzy. A great way to think about it is like building a massive, super-powered digital library and workshop. It's a place designed to solve incredibly complex problems way faster than we ever could before. Now, the official announcements also highlight a really hopeful human angle to all this. The project is framed as not just being about technology, but also about investing in people. Amazon states that it's partnering with local community colleges for workforce development, it's launching STEM programs for K-12 students, and it's even creating a new community fund for local projects. So if you remember just one thing from this story, let it be this. These huge tech investments aren't just about computers and cables. They're also major investments in local jobs and education. Okay, let's move on to our second story. And I just want to gently prepare you for this one, because it honestly sounds like it's pulled straight from a science fiction novel, but I promise you, it's a real and truly incredible medical procedure. The medical name for it is osteoodontokeratoprosthesis. Now, if that feels like a mouthful, you are not alone. So let's do our jargon check right away. In other words, it's a tooth-in-eye surgery. It uses a patient's very own tooth and the bone around it to create a living biological anchor that can hold a tiny prosthetic lens right in the eye. It's a really complex procedure that happens in stages. First, surgeons take out a tooth along with its root and a little bit of the jawbone. They shape this into a small plate called a lamina, and they fit it with a plastic lens. Now here's the amazing part. They implant this whole piece inside the patient's cheek. This allows it to grow its own blood supply over several months, becoming a living part of the body. Finally, they move this living prosthesis into the eye. And medical sources really emphasize that this is a last resort for patients with severe corneal blindness where every other option has already failed. And this is why it matters so much on a human level. According to reporting in All About Vision, this surgery is for people with something called end-stage ocular surface disease. This can be caused by things like severe chemical burns or certain autoimmune disorders. This procedure gives a chance to see again to people who might have had no other hope left. Of course, like any surgery this major, it does come with risks. A systematic review published in Ophthalmology and Allied Sciences gathered data on complications. The most common one is glaucoma, which affects about a third of patients. Other risks include things like the body reabsorbing the bone or some tissue death. But here's the hopeful part. The very same review that talks about the risks also shows a remarkable rate of success. So, despite all the challenges, different studies reported that the implants stayed in place, what they call anatomical retention, in 70 to 91% of cases. And even more importantly, somewhere between 68 and 88% of patients had a significant improvement in their vision. If you remember one thing about this incredible story, let it be this. For some of the most challenging medical cases out there, sometimes the most radical, bio-integrated solutions are the ones that offer the greatest hope.
Okay, on to our final story. We're shifting gears from medicine to a place where technology, the law, and public safety all intersect. This is a complex topic, so we're going to walk through it with care.
An article in the Journal of Law, Medicine, and Ethics kicks things off with this quote from Cody Wilson, who created the very first downloadable 3D printed gun. And it just perfectly captures the heart of the dilemma, right? Once the information is out there, how can you possibly regulate the physical things that information can create? So what exactly are ghost guns? The journal article describes them as do-it-yourself weapons. Because they can be made at home, often with a 3D printer, they don't have serial numbers, which makes them untraceable for law enforcement. They can also be obtained without any kind of background check, and the versions made mostly of plastic can be really tough to spot with a traditional metal detector.
Now, trying to regulate these things gets legally complicated fast. The source article explains that courts have generally used two different ways of thinking about gun laws. The first is the consensus two-step test, which tries to balance the benefits to public safety against the burden a law might place on Second Amendment rights. The other way is the history-only test, which asks, is there a direct comparison to a law that existed way back when the Second Amendment was written? And it's totally okay if this is new to you. This is a pretty specific corner of the legal world.
And this brings us to the core concern the authors raised, that history-only test creates a really unique problem. Can laws from the 1700s and 1800s really give us what we need to regulate a technology like 3D printing, which just didn't exist back then?
The source article does suggest a potential path forward through this legal maze. The authors argue that the more flexible two-step test offers a more practical framework. In their view, it allows courts to balance those timeless constitutional principles with the very real, very modern safety challenges that new technology creates.
So, the takeaway here is this. New technologies don't just challenge our daily habits, they challenge our oldest laws. They force us to have these tough conversations about how we apply timeless principles to a world that is constantly changing.
Wow, we have covered so much ground today. From building our digital future and healing the body in truly amazing ways, to figuring out how to update our oldest rules for a new world. If any of this feels like a lot, that is perfectly okay. It is absolutely okay not to understand everything at once. Just staying curious is more than enough.
This has been Telli Bear's Techy Tidbits, lovingly powered by AI. Thanks for keeping up with tech in such a thoughtful, grounded way. Have a magical day.